One of my favorite abilities out of all the Battle Shonen narratives I've engaged with over the last little while is Crazy Slots from Hunter x Hunter. Of course, there are a lot of abilities I love within Hunter x Hunter, whether it comes down to what they individually do, or as far as what they can teach us about Nen as a power system. That said, I think it's safe to say that Crazy Slots is one of my favorite abilities in all of Hunter x Hunter on a sheer rule of cool factor alone. Crazy Slots first appeared in chapter 193 of Hunter x Hunter within the Chimera Ant arc. The ability was conceptualized by Kite, Gon's mentor and a figure that Ging closely interacted with. On the Nen memo that we got from Togashi's exhibition, Kite is listed as a transmuter conjurer. Crazy Slots is a Nen conjuration ability in which Kite conjures the Crazy Slots character itself and uses that going forward to create one of 9 available weapons that are chosen at random. Presumably, Kite takes the aura that was used to conjure the Crazy Slots character object and then transmutes it into different forms individually to get said different Crazy Slots weapons. Even if Kite were to be leaning on Nen manipulation in order to change the form of Crazy Slots, despite the fact that it is across from him on the Nen affinity chart, and thusly not a great affinity for him to pull into, the randomness afforded by the Nen vows that makes Crazy Slots what it is might offset the Nen cost as a result, making the ability still somewhat effective. When the character of Crazy Slots is conjured by Kite, it rolls a number between 1 and 9 to determine what weapon Kite will get. And after Kite is given a weapon with Crazy Slots, he has to use the weapon presumably to do whatever he summoned Crazy Slots for until that job is completed or he hits some sort of goal, in which then Crazy Slots will allow him to de-summon the entity and then re-summon it to re-roll for another weapon. Throughout the brief period that Kite is within Hunter x Hunter and seen using Nen, we only actually experience 3 of the weapons that Crazy Slots has to offer. The first weapon we see being used coinciding with Crazy Slots' first appearance is in chapter 193, when Kite pulls out what is equivalent to a pistol mixed with a rifle. Out of the 9 numbers of Crazy Slots, we only end up seeing number 2, number 3, and number 4, the gun being number 4. In order of most straightforward weapon that we see Crazy Slots using to least straightforward, the gun is the most straightforward. I feel like we can describe the way that a gun is a gun similar to the way that a hunter is a hunter. In the way that a hunter's belief in themselves and willingness to hunt after whatever they want, even in spite of morals, is absolute and unquestionable, so is the path a bullet takes as it leaves the barrel of a gun and heads towards its destination. Keeping in mind that Kite is the first perspective we ever get on what a hunter even is in the first chapter of Hunter x Hunter, he is, in a sense, most representative of that base philosophical mold that defines what a hunter even is. Thusly, making the gun probably the most definitive representative of what Kite's philosophical perspective is as a manifestation of his beliefs through Nen. The next weapon we see Kite use with Crazy Slots is in chapter 196. In the bunch of chapters that is 194 to 197, after we see Kite use his gun for the first time, we then see him pull the scythe weapon from Crazy Slots, labeled as the number 2 weapon out of 9 for Crazy Slots. After obliterating a group of Chimera Ants, Kite mentions that the only technique he can use with number 2 is the Grim Reaper's Dance Silent Waltz, which is this large area of effect attack directly surrounding Kite. This weapon and thusly attack isn't as straightforward to use as the gun ability seemingly. The gun seems to be a jack of all trades for Kite, while the scythe and the Grim Reaper's Silent Waltz is sort of this trump card if you don't know how to deal with it or you don't see it coming. On top of the scythe seemingly lacking any sort of precision whatsoever, what Kite says to Gon and Killua before he uses the ability almost indicates that the way to beat it is probably just jumping straight up at a certain time. Out of Kite's toolkit afforded to him by Crazy Slots, at least as far as what we actually see in the series, the gun, number 4, would probably be equivalent to a scalpel, and the scythe, number 2, would probably be equivalent to a hammer. So where does that leave number 3, the last Crazy Slots weapon that we see? Well, if number 4, Kite's gun, is on the most straightforward end of the scale, that leaves number 3 on the least straightforward end. We don't actually see this Crazy Slot's weapon used in a fight. As in, not only do we not get to see the fight that this weapon is summoned in, but we don't even get to see it used anytime before or after. We see Kite summon number 3 when he reaches out to touch Neferpido's N and alerts them to his presence. After sending Gon and Killua away, he summons the number 3 weapon of Crazy Slots, and that's it. After that, he's dead, and we don't see Crazy Slots ever again. Ging mentions in chapter 335 that he taught Kite everything he knows about Nen, and that Crazy Slots has a number that only comes up when Kite really doesn't want to die. What's really interesting to me about this statement is that in Hunter x Hunter chapter 337, Gon meets with a reincarnation of Kite who came back into the world as a Chimera Ant. We don't know the exact functions behind how Kite reincarnated. The only thing we can assume is that it somehow has something to do with the Crazy Slots number that Ging mentioned, which would probably end up being the number 3 item that we saw Kite summon before they were killed. The number 3 Crazy Slots weapon that Kite summons before he's killed by Neferpido definitely wins the award for the least straightforward Crazy Slots weapon we see, partly because we don't even see it be used, partly because it somehow led to Kite reincarnating. I only noticed this as I was gathering manga screenshots to use for this video, but Crazy Slots is only in the story for 5 chapters, from chapter 194 to chapter 199. In that sense, I really can't complain about the fact that we didn't see the other Crazy Slot weapons. I mean, I will anyways, because I definitely wanted to see what other sort of Nen vows that Kite had to make to achieve those weapons and abilities. But like, as far as the sort of passive promises that Togashi made with Hunter x Hunter's narrative and Kite's inclusion within it, he didn't necessarily break any story promise to introduce us to every weapon of Crazy Slots. Crazy Slots might as well have only been 3 abilities for the purpose that it served specifically within this story, but I am convinced that Togashi absolutely thought up 9 of them just because he could. My favorite Crazy Slots weapon would either be the Resurrection Mace, as I would call it, aka number 3, or the Scythe. I think the Scythe has the best vibes for Kite's sort of quiet yet competent hunter vibe. But the Resurrection Mace is just so interesting. Like, why would Kite conceptualize that for his ability? I'd kind of like to think that the number 3 weapon for Crazy Slots is similar to Kurapika's Stealth Dolphin from the Succession contest. Like, that ability was normally left open until Kite had a specific need for it that he would solidify with his Nen for the first time he would pull that weapon. I think the Crazy Slots gun is cool too. Number 4. My main sort of bone to pick with it as a weapon concept for Crazy Slots is that it's a little boring when compared to the kind of broad, fantastical nature of the Scythe and the Resurrection Mace. It might be a very relevant and fitting sort of weapon for Kite's personality at large and the kind of variety of usefulness you can find with Crazy Slots. But like, what else are you hiding from us, Togashi? Is there anything more interesting that we didn't get to see? Though, that said, it is a little ungrateful feeling, because all things considered, Togashi could have only shown us 2 or 1 of the weapons that Crazy Slots has, so I should be grateful that he showed us 3 of the weapons, instead of acting like I'm sad he didn't give us 4. It's not even a nitpick, it's the audience equivalent of greed. The idea of or execution of Crazy Slots isn't somehow worse because it wasn't in the story for very long. To act as if my opinion of the concept is somehow lower because I wish we got more of it is a little silly. What little we saw of Crazy Slots really makes me wonder what the ability was like for Kite in his day-to-day life. I mean, why didn't he limit the ability to something like 3 or 4 weapons? Why 9? Just how many weapons could he have uses for? Oh well, it's a little futile to ask that question on the basis that Hunter x Hunter isn't a story where we follow Kite to learn about all the Crazy Slots weapons. The lack of a full picture we got on Crazy Slots, if anything, just makes me more interested in the sort of pit of mystery that is Kite and his Hunter misadventures that happened before we met him. He, like many other characters in Hunter x Hunter that we only get a perspective on for the brief time that they enter Gon's story, very clearly had a life of his own. And it just really makes me wonder what that life of his was like when it wasn't under extraordinary circumstances from which we get our perspective from. Kite and Crazy Slots were so cool, man. I really do wish they were around in the story for a little longer. Maybe it's better they didn't outstay their welcome, though. I wonder if I'd have this much to say if Kite was in the story for longer than he was. Maybe it's better that I'm left wanting more than wanting less.